NXT has been the breeding ground for future sports entertainment stars for over a decade now, and while the emphasis has always been on the men and women who will lead the way going forward, NXT has intermittently gotten help from established WWE stars along the way. Whether it's for a brief appearance, a one-off match, or even a short feud, a fair few WWE stars, many of them products of other versions of WWE's developmental systems themselves, have lent a hand from time to time. Some of them you might struggle to remember. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 20 WWE stars you forgot appeared in NXT. Join us! Number 20, Randy Orton. A man synonymous with WWE and its style, Randy Orton is a product of their old developmental system. A member of that ridiculously talented Ohio Valley wrestling class which graduated in 2002, the Legend Killer learned everything from scratch in an old shabby warehouse in Louisville, Kentucky before getting called up to the big leagues. How impressed he must have been with the setup when he showed up for a one-off match on NXT TV in early 2013. The multi-time WWE champion took on Damien Sandow, another WWE developmental success story, in the main event of the show, which aired on the March 27th Road to WrestleMania edition of NXT. Going around 10 minutes, the Viper and the intellectual savior of the masses had a routine match that ended with a crowd-pleasing RKO. The result was never in doubt, but it was nice to see a genuine headliner doing his bit to get some more eyeballs on the third brand. And it was also nice to see Howard Finkel handling ring announcing duties on the night. Number 19, The Big Show. Well, get ready for something that you never known. In theory, NXT performers should be walking towards making it to The Big Show, but in 2012, The Big Show came to them. The actual Big Show, you know, the wrestler. Show didn't swing by Full Sail just the once either, but several times over the course of a couple of years. The first time was in summer of 2012 when he beat Alex Riley in a dark match main event. The second time, just 4 or so months later, the world's largest athlete returned as the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. That time, he wiped the floor with Bo Dallas in a match that aired during the end-of-year Best of show. In late 2013, Show was there to do his part in a dark segment with Dusty Rhodes, NXT General Manager JBL, Christ remember that, Triple H, and a bunch of NXT goons that Show knocked out one by one. Show's involvement with the third brand doesn't end there though, as he came back to take on Cesaro in another dark match in the summer of 2014. Number 18, Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho has been there, seen it, and done it all. Throughout his long and illustrious career, he has wrestled just about everywhere, enjoying great runs in Mexico, Japan, ECW, WCW, WWE, and now AEW. He also has, to his credit, one match in NXT. Y2J made the short drive from his Florida home to Full Sail in the spring of 2013 to take on Bray Wyatt, who, on the cusp of a call-up to the main roster, was terrorizing the black and gold brand along with Luke Harper and Eric Rowan. Jericho and Wyatt collided in a main event and were good value for their top billing. Chris got the win with the Walls of Jericho, which irked some given how dominant the Eater of Worlds had been to that point, but the fact is that NXT was still viewed as developmental, and Jericho was a major star on WWE TV. He would return the favour on a bigger stage the next year anyway, putting Bray over at SummerSlam 2014. Number 17, Tajiri. It was great to see the perennially underrated Tajiri resurface in WWE in 2016, over a decade after he quit the company. The Japanese buzzsaw first showed up in the Cruiserweight Classic before competing on a very special episode of NXT TV. This episode was filmed from Osaka, Japan, and featured a loaded card that included several Japanese stars in major matches, such as Asuka defending her NXT Women's title against Nia Jax, and Shinsuke Nakamura beating Samoa Joe to become NXT champion. Tajiri teamed with fellow countryman Akira Tozawa in a bid to win the NXT Tag Team titles from DIY. The foursome had the match of the night, a 20-minute barn burner that showed the former WWE Cruiserweight and Tag Team Champion rolling back the years and more than keeping up with his younger colleagues. Despite being in his mid-40s, Tajiri hadn't lost a step, and it was a treat to watch him do his thing. Speaking of treats, fans in Full Sail a few weeks later had the opportunity to watch him in another NXT match, this time a non-televised outing that saw him partner with Nakamura to beat Joe and Bobby Roode. Number 16, the Bella Twins. It seems mad to think now now, looking back, but WWE let Brie and Nikki Bella willingly leave the company in the spring of 2012. The Bellas were tired from the grind and far from content with the way the Divas division was going, and so they decided to try their luck elsewhere, which included making appearances on a couple of independent shows. WWE were able to convince them to return in March of 2013 and would end up pretty much building the women's division around them for several years, but their first order of business was shaking off some of that ring rust down in Orlando. In their first match back, Nikki and Brie wrestled and beat the Funkadactyls, Cameron and Naomi, at an NXT taping. Though it was the first time they'd stepped into a WWE-owned ring for a while, the match actually aired after a few others they'd had on Main Event, Raw and SmackDown. The Bellas also had NXT history, if you remember, having served as the pros for hard-bodied rookie Jamie on Season 3 of the game show version of the show. Number 15, SHEAMUS. The Celtic Warrior knew all about WWE's developmental system, having grafted for years in the old Florida Championship Wrestling promotion before earning his call up to the main roster. When Sheamus went back to developmental, it may have only been a few years since he was in the system, but he returned to a much improved setup as a fully fledged WWE star. Old Lobsterhead ended up wrestling twice for the third brand. The first time in July of 2013, he took on Luke Harper in a typically surly main event. Sheamus got the clean win with the bro kick, but made his opponent look very good en route to victory. In fact, though the two men met several times in later years in tag matches, this was their only ever televised singles meeting. About 9 months later, the Great White would be back, this time to take on the slightly less formidable Aiden English. Another main event, this was surprisingly competitive, and English got to shine before succumbing to the bro kick. Number 14, Santino Marella. One of the words that best describes early day NXT is fun. There were fun characters, fun angles and storylines, and the whole presentation was light and easy to digest and simply fun to watch. And what could possibly be more fun than a surprise appearance by faux Italian funny man Santino Marella? The NXT fans were sure happy to see him, judging by the pop, when he was revealed as Emma's surprise partner for her mixed tag match with Fandango and Summer Rae on the October 2nd, 2013 edition of the show. It was pure light-hearted comedy and a nice way to kick off the episode, the Milan Miracle getting the win after hitting Fandango with the Cobra. The men and women of NXT at the time would have been smart to watch this match, since it was a great example of WWE-style entertainment, the sort of thing that goes down a treat on main roster house shows. And here's hoping Santino was also on hand to dispense some advice from his own time in WWE developmental, such as what to do when you're physically assaulted backstage by a furious Jim Cornette. Number 13, Kofi Kingston. 2/3 of the New Day were made in NXT, with Big E and Xavier Woods both spending significant time there before being brought to main. Kofi Kingston, on the other hand, toiled in Deep South, OVW, and FCW before graduating to ECW long before E and Woods were in the system. Kingston showed up on NXT in early 2014 to work a short program with Alexander Rusev. The Bulgarian Brute had run through most of the NXT roster and was quite clearly being groomed for a call-up in the near future, so it made sense to put him in there with an experienced main roster worker like Kofi. They would have 2 matches, with Rusev winning the first in emphatic style. Serious credit to Kofi here, who did the job for the promising rookie in just a couple of minutes, making him look very strong in the process. 2 weeks later, Kofi was back for the rematch, where things went very differently. Rather than a simple squash, the two had a long back-and-forth main event. This time, the babyface got the W with the Trouble in Paradise. Number 12, Brian Kendrick. In early 2015, it was reported that WWE wanted some solid hands from the past to join the roster, with Rhino and Brian Kendrick showing up at Full Sail amid rumors that more ex-WWE stars were on their way in. Though the Man-Beast had a solid NXT run, including a feud with Baron Corbin and matches against Samoa Joe and others, Kendrick only had 1 match for the promotion before disappearing again, then reappearing a year later in the Cruiserweight Classic and as a member of the 205 Live roster. The Brian Kendrick squared off with Finn Balor in the main event of the February 25th, 2015 episode of NXT. They had themselves a rather enjoyable match, where the former WWE Tag Team Champion gave a good account of himself before finally succumbing to the coup de grace. In late 2012, it looked as though Kendrick was going to wrestle Haaland on NXT 2.0 TV, but the match ended up not happening for whatever reason, and their feud was seemingly forgotten about. Number 11, Team Hell No. Independent wrestling standout and former WWE developmental prospect Bryan Danielson first came to the attention of the wider WWE universe thanks to his participation in the very first series of NXT The Game Show. He returned to the brand when it really was starting to become a brand, and he didn't come back alone. Bringing his Team Hell No Tag Team Championship partner Kane with him, the Odd Couple duo defended their titles against Michael McGillicuddy and Johnny Curtis in the main event of the show that aired on November 28, 2012. It was a routine win, but a nice surprise for the Full Sail faithful. Amazingly though, this was not the first time that Kane had wrestled inside an NXT ring. A month later, on their end-of-year special, NXT broadcast a previously unseen match between the Big Red Machine and Cody Rhodes, which had been taped that summer. It was a short and sweet way to end what had been a pivotal year in NXT's brief history. Kane won the match with the chokeslam, in case you were wondering. I bet you were. I bet you'd have lost sleep over that if I didn't tell you. Number 10, The Great Khali. When you think of NXT, you probably think about the charismatic, young up-and-coming stars of the future, or the well-rounded, technically gifted super athletes that made it such a hot brand. All of those things, of course, apply to the Great Khali. The Punjabi playboy waddled into Full Sail in April 2014, the giant making very short work of CJ Parker. His appearance was a surprise, and given where CJ was in the pecking order of the time, fans knew exactly how it was going to go. Khali had previously been involved with the game show version of NXT in 2010 and 2012, getting a win over Daniel Bryan and then teaming with Ezekiel Jackson to beat Kurt Hawkins and Tyler Rex. That's right, the Great Khali is undefeated in NXT, folks. It's a damn shame WWE never utilized him in the role of someone's pro. The former World Heavyweight Champion would have been the perfect person to teach tallness, mobility, and promo skills. Number 9, John Cena. There is perhaps no bigger WWE developmental success story than John Cena. The face that runs the place was a member of that standout OVW class of 2002 and had built a solid following due to his work with the prototype gimmick. He overcame initial main roster apathy to turn it around and become the biggest star in the business. As top dog who knew full well how the system works, it's no surprise that he would want to keep an eye on future prospects. Big Match John never actually wrestled a match for the third brand, of course, but he did pop by on a couple of occasions to see what all the fuss was about. Both times his appearances were dark and thus for the benefit of the live audience only, meaning that you couldn't see him. The first time he did a segment with Damian Sandow and Enzo and Cass that ended up with him hitting Sandow with an AA through a table. The second time he was on hand at NXT Arrival to congratulate Adrian Neville following the Newcastle Natives NXT title win. Number 8, Jack Swagger. Jack Swagger and Zeb Coulter decided to check out NXT after hearing a bit of buzz about some up-and-comer named Sami Zayn, who was on a tear and had previously beaten his fellow Real American and tag team partner Antonio Cesaro. A very nice contrast in style, Swagger played the dominant powerhouse to Zayn's plucky high flyer, the two having a match that built nicely, with the crowd staying with them every step of the way. The fans were firmly behind the underdog from the underground, who had to fight from underneath as he was constantly worn down and cut off by his larger opponent. One of the best matches at that point in NXT's short history, the All-American American provided a reminder of what he was capable of doing when the handcuffs were off, putting in a solid shift as the two ramped up the intensity and busted out the finishers. In the end, NXT champion Bo Dallas, coming out to cheer on potential future challenger Zayn, provided the distraction that allowed Swagger to lock on the Patriot Lock for the tap-out victory. Swagger would return to NXT the following year to put over Rusev in a post-taping dark match. Number 7, The Shield. Each of Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose did their time in WWE's developmental before bursting onto the scene at Survivor Series 2012 and quickly establishing themselves as one of the top acts in the promotion. Fewer people know or remember that, not too long later, the three of them were back as The Shield, ready to wage war with the next generation of hopefuls. After dismantling a few nobodies in a six-man, Axel Keegan, Scott Dawson, and Percy Watson, the Hounds of Justice turned their attentions to Adrian Neville, Corey Graves, and Xavier Woods. First, the Lunatic Fringe defended his United States title against Neville, which ended in a DQ thanks to interference, before the six men collided in a rip-roaring tag team main event. The Shield hadn't long been on the road with the main roster, but they already looked like major stars, with Ambrose holding the US title while Reigns and Rollins held the tag straps. With all that hardware and with them having been so dominant on WWE television, there was no way they were losing here. Surely. Wait a second. Oh wait, yeah, they won. Number 6, Dolph Ziggler. Dolph Ziggler's association with NXT goes back to 2010, when he was the pro to rookie Jacob Novak on the game show version of the show's 4th season. The show-off had a torrid time of it, as Novak was the first eliminated from the competition. Then Ziggler won a battle royal to choose a new rookie and picked Byron Saxton, the second man eliminated from the competition. He came back to take in the lay of the land a few years later, taking on the barefooted, barrel-chested Alexander Rusev on the August 25th, 2013 episode of the show. The two went about 7 minutes before Rusev missed a top rope splash and fell to the zigzag. Rusev would have the last laugh though in 2015 when he had to stand by as Ziggler made out with Lana before the Bulgarian brute failed to beat him in either their SummerSlam or Night of Champions grudge matches. Oh, actually now that I think about it, Rusev really didn't have the last laugh there, did he? Number 5, Rob Van Dam. When Rob Van Dam returned to WWE in the summer of 2013, fans were no doubt looking forward to seeing how he matched up with the current crop of stars. After all, the whole flippin' show had been away for a good 6 years, and there were lots of new faces for him to kick a chair at. What fans likely didn't expect was that the ECW legend would show up in the small halls of NXT. But that is exactly what the veteran did on 2 occasions. On the first, he squared off with Aiden English in what was a perfectly decent exhibition for both, before RVD put him away with the 5-star frog splash. The second time Van Dam stopped by Full Sail, he faced a sterner test in the form of then NXT champion Adrian Neville. An intergenerational high-flying dream match, the two Daredevils did not disappoint in this non-title outing. Both got the chance to shine with their signature offense, and considering the title wasn't on the line, there was every chance Rob was walking away as the winner. Refreshingly, he didn't, putting the man that gravity forgot over clean before shaking hands with his opponent. Good lad. Number 4, Christian. A late career in-ring NXT run for Christian would have been something else, I'm sure, as he would have no doubt worked wonders with the likes of Adrian Neville, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, and so on. Regrettably, Captain Charisma was forced into retirement due to repeated concussion issues, just as NXT was threatening to properly take off. Christian, who was Heath Slater's pro on the first season of NXT The Game Show, did make it to Full Sail once, though he didn't wrestle as he wasn't cleared at the time. Once again, his was a dark match segment treat for the live crowd. Christian hosted an edition of Peep Show following the October 10th, 2013 tapings. He did a 5-second pose before welcoming his special guest, World Heavyweight Champion Alberto Del Rio. ADR talked about beating John Cena in their upcoming Hell in a Cell match, which brought out Alexander Rusev. Del Rio retreated before his former ring announcer Ricardo Rodriguez came back and threw him into the ring, where he was promptly laid out by Rusev, who then also knocked out Ricardo for the lols. Rusev, in case you weren't aware, is a great man. Number 3, Too Cool. NXT arrival was a big deal, not just for the third brand, but for WWE as a whole. Not only was it the first takeover-style event for NXT, but it was the first show that would be streamed live via the WWE Network. There were a lot of expectations on the stars of tomorrow, but few probably expected some of the stars of yesterday to turn up. Grandmaster Sexay and Scotty 2 Hotty, better known as Too Cool, answered NXT Tag Team Champions The Ascension's Open Challenge, battling Connor and Victor for the gold. Naturally, the Attitude Era favourites weren't able to dethrone the dominant champs, who ended up holding the belts for the best part of a year. But it was nice to see Sexay and Scotty do their thing together for what would prove to be for the last time on a major stage. This wasn't the first NXT outing for the Master of the Worm, however, as Scotty had previously wrestled and beaten Heath Slater a couple of years prior at the same taping where Kane wrestled Cody Rhodes. Number 2, CM Punk. The WWE Champion showing up in NXT is always a welcome event, even if they're just there to wave to the camera or raise the hand of a top talent. The WWE Champion not only showing up, but also wrestling and working pretty bloody hard is a great example to set. And that is what CM Punk did when he came to Full Sail in the summer of 2012, just days after successfully defending his title against Big Show and John Cena at SummerSlam. The straight-edge superstar, rocking the Bret Hart tribute gear no less, went one-on-one with Antonio Cesaro, the bout ending in a DQ when Cassius Ohno ran in. NXT champion Seth Rollins made the save, setting up a Punk and Rollins versus Kings of Wrestling Indie Dream match, serving as the dark main event for that particular TV taping. Punk had previously done an on-camera bit with Rollins backstage, by the way. The match was released on a Best of NXT DVD, mind you, and it's pretty flipping good, unsurprisingly, going about 15 minutes until the babyfaces hit their stereo finishers to send the crowd home happy. Number 1, Batista. Batista's 2014 run is seen as something of a bit of a disaster, as the supposedly returning hero was rejected in favor of Daniel Bryan, who ended up stealing his big WrestleMania world title win. Then he got mocked for having the temerity to wear the color blue and took off, not to be seen in the ring for another 4 years or so. Or so you thought. Once the Animal's main roster run was wrapped up, he did a favor for his old pal and mentor Triple H by making a dark appearance after an NXT taping. Big Dave didn't say much besides thanking the fans for being there before Bo Dallas interrupted him. The former NXT champion suggested that the pair of them team up as Bo-Tista. The Guardians of the Galaxy star considered it for a moment and seemed up for the idea when he shook hands with Dallas. You know what's coming next, don't you? Yes, Batista pulled him in and dropped him with a mighty spinebuster before leaving the arena and hailing a cab to the skinny jeans store.